Chill here with Sirius Talis Moon, Mercury Hour, Venus Day. Moon conjoining Jupiter in Cancer, and Venus is 21 degrees Pisces, applying to conjoin Mercury retrograde. Ascendant ruled by Mars and midheaven by Saturn. Saturn and Mars in reception, Mars in Aquarius, Saturn in Aries. I was beginning a series where I actually addressed the wealth of people, tribes, nations, and societies. This episode is actually dedicated to Venus, from the perspective of Mercury coming to conjoin Venus. In changing cultures, whether it's in China, even in Afghanistan, um, different regions around the world, we see that even under quite challenging regime changes, the cultures and the societies where not women, but the child self and the sexual energy, meaning ability to say yes, no, and maybe, was honored, those societies remained and maintained their wealth. In those societies where there was no such thing as slavery or enslavement, as, um, of course, rape or any such thing, not under any justification, not as marriage and not as profession and not as intelligence, those societies sustained. Not as matriarchies necessarily. And we see that because those are the things that are essential to maintain a happy, thriving community, even when the regime around is weird. Um, Whereas we see that, let's asking ourselves, who are the most persecuted societies in the world, other than Masonry? And Masonry is imbued with slavery, organ trade, human trafficking. So, of course, they're persecuted. We see Jews, which I addressed in previous episode, of how Jews, um, actually there were prophets within the Judaic tradition, like Prophet Amos, that predicted exile when they received the premonition that, and Amos, his job was to clone, he was cloning sheep's cattle. But he himself received the premonition from his own job, not from his own job, but understanding. Um, and according to the Judaic tradition, God was just showing himself to this person who was supposed to do cloning and clone the cattle. And he was showing himself because he was the person who basically was supposed to supposedly provide for food. And God showed himself to Amos and said to him, first of all, God had to convince him. And then God said to him that their people, the people he's cloning the sheep to feed, in so many words that he needs to clone sheep to feed, and that's not in the Bible, but if we understand the practices of Epstein ring and the cloning project and MK Ultra, child trafficking, we understand that the reasoning that Amos even needed to clone sheep was because of men who trafficked, fathers that trafficked their daughters, that did arrange the marriages, that required usury, because the wealth was not coming authentic and originally and organically. because women were raped, daughters were raped in society. And he predicted that this use of human trafficking, usury, and trafficking the daughters or arranged marriage will bring exile. Then he talks to his community, and they don't accept it that well. And he said, well, then it will happen to your family. It would mean that your daughters, if you don't understand that the community is doing that, then it's you. You are part of the community. It's your daughter that will be trafficked. Don't you care? Don't you? And Amos was not incorrect. And the community, the Judaic tradition, they were exiled and they were in slavery. And we see that up until today, the topic of usury, arranged marriages, even ritual sacrifice, and things that even if we open the Bible and we see God shows himself to Abraham, he said, oh, come sacrifice this child, because it was the custom that the God sacrificed the child, and Abraham felt so honored. And then God says to him, I don't need you to sacrifice this child to have the support of the gods. And then Abraham insists on something that is genitalia mutilation. And back then God saw Abraham would not agree to anything, and he allowed this back then. But this is a remaining of something that has nothing to the connection with the divine. Up until today, there are rabbinical people that are afraid that people will not accept it, that the genitalia mutilation called circumcision is actually not our contract with God, but it's something that was taken from the days of before the monotheistic God revelation. Unfortunately, in cults and secret societies, these things are still, ritual sacrifice of children is still practiced. And there are even families that sacrifice their first child. This causes persecution, exile, and impoverished medicine, like I talked about the petroleum in the medicine, while the Rockefellers themselves use homeopathy. Now, Jews were persecuted because of this mistreat to children, ritual abuse, and the children are often dissociated, and basically because of arranged marriage, because of rape in the family that was normalized, and because of the vision of slavery. Yes, there are many Jews that still believe that people are enslaved to Jews while they themselves act as slaves. And so Jews were persecuted for many, many years because of these habits and costumes. Then there are the Irish people. And in Irish people, there were churches. In the beginning, of course, it was pre-Christian, but the Irish society did not besiege the churches when these churches trafficked women, because the notion of trafficking was normalized. And Irish people suffered a lot of colonization, a lot of exile. Then the more recent story is the Palestinians, 75 years of living in a small strip, and Palestinian people persecuted women and children. So much so that if a person was going through a crisis, they would be locked and they would treat the crazies and lock them, not unlike the British right before the dissolution of the empire, which is in Victorian times. Yes, please.
The caucus, כן?
I know, yes.
זה נטו קוקוס.
Yes. So, תגרדי אולי את השכבה הראשונה, כי יכול להיות שנגעתי בזה עם היד. כן, בואי, תביאי. Yeah. I thought that my body cream is the coconut oil. תביאי. לא משנה. So, they would lock the people that went to crisis, like the Victorian ages, and they would keep people locked. Many societies, by the way, did that. And this is because people were raped and then they became crazy. Children. And so it came to 75 years of society living. And what happened then? The people were funded, they got grants. My mother actually wrote a book about it, and later I would see actually students that did got such grants. And they went to places like Britain to study, funded by oil companies, whether it's British, whether it's Qatar. And yes, and then they would learn the cultures in exile. So, for example, they could learn that if a person went through crisis, to tie them or to confine them is not solution. But until these people could bring something different to the culture, because they were, even in exile, they would be exposed to the secret societies that molest, that rape, that traffic. And by the way, by that they would have trade connection with Israel. It was Palestinian-Israeli Chamber of Commerce, and I tried to do apprenticeship there. I ran away because I began to feel sick, and even the women had culture that was of sexualization of the discourse. And it was custom, even my boss, that was head of intelligence, he believed that it introduced me to a man that was owning biggest food company in Israel, one of the biggest, and he thought that I will have something from this and he will have something from this. And because in indigenous societies this was the costume, and also indigenous societies were colonized because it was expected to have transsexual relationships where having sex for something else is the thing that must not be done if a person wants wealth. This I know from the mafiosi person that smuggled Anneke Lucas away from being child trafficked. He told her never to buy drugs and never to have sex in compensation for something, even if it's a husband. Not to appease in sex, it's the wealth. Okay, people like me have Pisces ascendant and Libra 8th house. Very important. Also, if we have boyfriend, never to have sex just for the sake of peace or to appease. Sexual pleasure matters, and of course the partners also. But this is the wealth. It's our basically ability to sustain, to have a house, to have a household, to have individual wealth, and be able to provide for ourselves, whether we are alone, so that we can have the right to say yes, no, maybe, or to divorce, or as couple. In societies where there's arranged marriage, sex cults, and so on and so forth, constantly they have to loot. And for example, I am half Dutch, and we had Dutch East India, and actually our previous prime minister, that's now head of NATO, previous Prime Minister, now head of NATO, he has Indonesian roots. And so we know that because of the cloning culture in our culture, the Dutch colonization, while not being too big like in British or Spanish, was considered very cruel. But also the local traditions, yes, they would abandon their wife. I saw when I was in Netherlands, a Suriname, either Suriname or Indonesian couple, and the husband abandoned the wife in the cold, and she was in the shelter. And this shows us how, if there was domestic violence, and husband could abandon wife in the cold, then came the colonizers, Dutch, and they were also very cool to him.
זה נזרוק,
Yes.
כן?
But later they would learn that they need to be better to women.
עשית או לא עשית?
In as much as, כן, כן, הכל בסדר.
נהיית כפית גם.
It's okay.
אז זה בסדר.
Yes, yes. And in as much as they treated women well, but in Netherlands we had normalization of human trafficking, and people called human trafficking sex work. Actually, Netherlands is one of the countries where it started to be, people called it sex workers' work, because they normalized trafficking to try to prevent further crime. They tried to legalize everything, but they basically legalized human trafficking by that. And this causes a lot of susceptibility to invasion. A lot of Dutch people, including myself, live outside of Netherlands, not because we don't love our countries, but because there's no housing if we don't traffic. And as we saw from case of Marc Dutroux, who's Belgian, but also network that is international, he could not have estates if he was 15 years old, and then he met pedophile adult, and then probably introduced him to the network, and then he started trafficking girls and torturing them, and then he had a couple of houses. So what we can see is the role of Venus and the moon, but also the role of Venus. And in countries and societies and tribes where Venus women are treated well, not as transactional, this society thrives. Even in Afghanistan, the only tribe that survived was tribe where women are treated well. In their case, it's matriarchal, but it doesn't have to be matriarchal. Actually, when I was in shelter in Netherlands during COVID, I escaped because Israel had no solution for homeless people. They wanted us to do crime. They wanted us to do terror. And I didn't want. So in Netherlands, also I did not get house because I did not do the true like things. This is the truth. This is the truth. This is why I did not have a safe place for long. Because I was not agreeing to also commit crime. Okay, for Marc Dutroux, the safety was by being perpetrator, and I did not agree to do that. Either that, or there's some sort of infiltration that I'm not informed of, but it was definitely within the shelters. So and this has definitely shaped my worldview. So the fact that I was subjected to that, to such things, and that of course it came in the junctures where I was supposed to have received my rights. Now, basically, what I saw is that those cultures and societies that mistreated women, um, even there was and allowed women to not have safe place to be, live safe and free, they were susceptible to invasion. And indeed, we see there were a lot of violence also in Netherlands because of these things. So it also goes to usury because in such societies the economy is designed so that people will not have enough, so that people will trade and traffic their children. But then we see in societies that treat women well that they have wealth and the people have wealth, and one doesn't even need to be patriotic. But yes, a lot of people don't live in Netherlands because they can't afford living in Netherlands because they can't, because if they don't do crime, then they don't have housing in Netherlands. And it's the same in Israel. So, and this is because of the mistreat, whether hidden or not, to women. By the way, Neptune is the higher octave of women, of Venus, and so even in intelligence, even in astral, even when nobody looks, to treat women well, this is prosperity and wealth. And the feminine within oneself as well. Okay. This is why in astrology, when we look at Venus, Venus is also the appearance where a loved woman is glowing. And a woman who is blamed for her rape is terroristic, is creating bodies upon bodies, dead bodies upon dead bodies of men turned into stone, as we see in the story of Beta Persei. Netherlands has Moon, the 1800 chart, conjoining Beta Persei. Israel has Sun, Beta Persei, and indeed a lot of the leaders were part of Epstein rings. We saw the link to Ehud Barak, but also Benjamin Netanyahu and his spouse with the Epstein files. So what can we take from that? Honor our own feminine, regardless of our gender. Honor us and women in our lives. Honor the yes, no, and maybe, both in self-pleasure and in sexuality. Not to have sex to please another, and not to demand that somebody will appease one with sexuality. Of course, when one does not honor that, then they have violated both women that normalize to appease someone with sex, basically are living in societies where even women cannot live around them. This is why I couldn't have a job in Israel, because I would get sick all the time, because even women around me would be participating in this type of interactions, connections, and conversations. Um, And again, I cannot know if there are people in my family. There have people in the more extended family that work in Tel Aviv University, and I know that there are trafficking rings in universities, so there are many things that I don't know about my extended family. Although the child of that family actually saved me from being kidnapped to hospital. And they have members that work in the pharmaceutical company, which is they put petroleum in the medicine, so I really don't know. Okay, there are many things that I don't know. Um, because part of the family did not want to speak with my mom when was overwhelmed upon the death of my grandmother, and it took us time to reach the cemetery. Um, so this is showing that even my close family was not trauma informed. Uh, and, and trauma informed is simply loving family life, understanding that grieving can be in more than one way. If a person is overwhelmed, it's not that they don't care. As I'm tending to recovery from trauma, I see that most of what I call recovery from trauma is simply a loving society. And I see that the trauma was the society.
פיזרו את זה מלא.
Mm. Oh my god, this is the best chocolate ever.
נכון.
It runs in the family. My grandmother used to work in elite factory as a chocolatier. She lost her 2 feet for that. So my mama was afraid of consuming sugary food, so not to lose her feet. And now my mama is preparing healthy chocolate. So yes, I think it has vanilla extract. I need to buy good vanilla extract. She used the thing from the supermarket, but coconut oil. This is very good. Maple. I introduced maple. I need to have good sourcing of maple with trees that were not cut to bring the sap. So, yes, I know I've killed Canada right now. I know there are other resins that they use in aromatherapy, like myrrh and frankincense. There's a business I think they're from Kenya. I still need to try their products because they do not cut the tree to use the sap. And I hope I will get this month to order from there. If I make it before the war with Iran. Yesterday I was taken to train, and the train back was so quiet. Everybody's so afraid that people don't go to work, they don't go anywhere. Everything is so. It's like the war has already begun. Um, but now, in this time, with so many places, people's traditions, and such difficult times, I want us to remember that um, there are solutions, and each and every one of us can incorporate these things and treat ourselves better and treat others better, even in stuff like escaping trafficking rings and so on. I saw that Neptune, amiable aspects, would bring uh, saving grace energy. And this is where we can use even something like AstroSeek and pick a time where Neptune was in amiable aspect, or if we have not amiable aspects of Neptune in the natal chart, we can try to think what is the amiable aspect. Okay, my Mercury, for example, and my Venus trine Neptune. And the Venus that we had now in the first decan of Pisces, those who have the talismans, was trining the Neptune of the 1984 3. So those of us that are going to the Neptune square. Whereas the 1989, I saw also colleague Chris Brennan, um, from whom I learned about all of the Hellenistic tradition, the lots. Yes, I wouldn't call myself Hellenistic astrologer, um, but all we have Jupiter around the same degree in Decan of Capricorn, and both of us deal with the 1989 people and the 1990 people besieging our Jupiter with their Saturn Neptunes. So for him it is in the 12th house, so it's even worse. Um, yes, so, but what I have to say also to my colleague Brennan is this thing that I just said and how very important it is. But also in self-pleasure, also with sexuality, never to appease with sexuality, never to think sex work is work. Yes, I have, I know that I met people that were sex workers, and they really didn't want to be judged, but I'm not judging them. But we can't, we have to understand that the paradigm sex work is work, means that it normalizes rape and this caused indigenous societies to be colonized and to have the land looted. Communities, and I see it still in indigenous communities, communities allow the members of society to be raped for money, and then they're constantly poor and constantly dependent on charity. Now, charity is a lovely thing, not without Venus. Jupiter is charity, and I can tell you to be benevolent, to be charitable, to I'm charitable with my teachings. Um, but not on account of Venus. I give all the teachings for free. Again, it doesn't mean that I will not have pay teachings or pay this or pay that, um, but I can be charitable with my teachings, but not with my Venus. And if you remember that, um, you will have prosperity, that wealth that is actually wealthy, because if you have a big mansion but people are raped there, then nobody is free in that mansion. And but in societies where women respected, and it also would mean that the boys are respected. I saw survivors of ritual abuse, even those that called them wife whore, those that were participating in trafficking or going to, okay, trafficked women. I had even a very, very good friend. Such good friends. If I was depressed, he would teach me quantum because he knew that it would regulate my nervous system. If he was hungry and I had food, if I was hungry and he had food, but then they took him to a trafficked woman and they paid money for him to rape her. And he had such trauma from that. And even though he was very attractive and charismatic, always these things were difficult. And also, I could never not to hug him, not anything. Also, maybe they took him to intelligence or to those secret societies, and I would also, sometimes you see me doing this, he would do that a lot. And later I learned that this is because that they rape these people. And he never told me that, but when I was targeted, I understood that this is what they do to people. I was targeted because I exposed that they use trauma to do mind control. And this is how people like Epstein or Detru would become Detrus and Epstein because of mind control. And then wherever I tried, if I would try to go to psychologist, or if I would try to take responsibility of my health and so on, or to holistic healer even, and now I saw this is even in astrology. Okay, Saturn Neptune generation that has the Soviet Union timestamp. This Saturn and Neptune is around our Jupiter. And the 7 survivors I saw was from this year that they would have Saturn Neptune. And that can be a chronic imprisonment and ailment because of this, or dealing with ritual abuse chronically. The remediation points, I have my sun in Taurus, which is remediation point for them. People have sun middle decan Aquarius, I'm sorry, Pisces, which is one of my colleagues, is also remediation point. Sun middle decan Scorpio, what my mom has, and Sun middle decan Virgo. I'm not sure. No, this is first decan. Sun middle decan Virgo would also be a remediation point for this, or not just Sun, any placement. Any placement would be a remediation point. My Lilith is actually remediation point because um, I understood that because of my Lilith in middle decan Pisces, um, I understood that um, that any sort of trafficking or sex work is work mindset, or even appeasing by sex, is for planning of assassination. And some of them have their lineages because maybe the family ran extortion cult, then the lineage is all targeted, and this is the intelligence is where people are not raped, and then they get good information. Okay, they get actually true cohesion. And this is why I also share the good information charitably. Um, and um, more things around this topic of Venus. Yes, it's also when people are not raped, they have they and honor their sensuality and sexuality. They have and you will see the more embodied the sensuality is, the more true cohesive the information is. And the clearer are the water. And also, it's about water, because societies where, and addressed it as yin and yang, but societies where a woman, the feminine and women mistreated, they suffer from lack of water. Now, for Netherlands, it expresses itself as polluted water. I remember the first time me and my mom took me to the place, to the lady that she and my father were staying at when they were married. Um, and we stayed at Netherlands, and we were told that the water, I think back then you couldn't drink the water from the tap or something like that. Or we were wondering why did she need to change the plants in the garden. And she told us, yes, the water, there's water, but it's very cold. Or that the water that runs in the canals are not just ready to drink. I, as a girl, did not understand that. So um, the water that runs through the canals, they're not just ready to drink. Um, yes, and so so this water are not ready to drink, and this is because the water needs to be clear, and this is only when, yeah, for example, also girls that go through forced sex change or forced gender expression as men um, in those rituals. Um, that also is problem with yin, fifth vital sign, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this is basically, and in societies that they didn't have this knowledge, or that the treatment of Venus was as the woman is like passed through, and whether it's indigenous societies, Sedna was supposed to teach that to the Inuit, not to do that. But still today there are stories that see Sedna as woman that was too spoiled. This, if people, even indigenous people that see this as Sedna's story, they should listen to the BIPOC people and the people that were trafficked that see Sedna, that Sedna was trafficked and then they had to appease Sedna because they did not have food. And it was already then the energies, whether it's minerals, oil and gas as today or whatnot, because it's the same costumes of the Epstein rings as the costumes that mine the oil and put petroleum in the medicine. But also when they would rape and torture their shamans, not Inuit necessarily, but certain societies, this would harm and lower the frequency of the entire society. Um, to expose people to both men activities and woman activities, yes, that is fantastic. But to harm people, particularly as children, there would be one shaman, and the one who would call to be shaman would be raped by that shaman and tortured by that shaman. And they were supposed to recover the entire village with them, but basically what would happen is that they would lower the frequency of the village, and it would make people more susceptible to invasion and perpetual intertribal wars. Okay, probably people in Choctaw Nation know what I talk about because Choctaw people were almost the only people left in their territories because all the others were killed. and, and there was something that was making them susceptible to invasion. Um, I know from indigenous people would tell me, I know that the term, every time the term changes, so I'm not the best informed on how to speak, but people from various tribes, and to remember the tribe is important because it's to remember the I am and the tribe and indigenous. Just like as the Netherlands was the citizens of the world, I am Shirley, I am me, I'm, I'm sovereign person, I'm half Israeli, half Dutch, yes, family of course, and of course I'm also citizen of the world. Um, and in Netherlands we believe we're citizens of the world, of the world, um, meaning that, and note that this is why for many years the Dutch passport was accepted almost everywhere, is this perception of citizen of the world. Um, but because of trafficking normalized, because of rape normalized, because of ritual abuse and so on and so forth, then it permeates housing crisis, not only in Israel and Netherlands, but also we see it in the United States. We saw it within the Palestinians, particularly now as I think it's probably already fair to speak about the coming Palestinian state. So we wouldn't want the Palestinian, I wouldn't want for the Palestinians to suffer through what the countries and nations that were participating in Detrow rings and Epstein rings were suffering. Um, and Venus is just one point of interference, but now with Venus in Pisces, we have the chance to give Venus teachings, because Jupiter sign is teachings, and um, and this is information that was usually with the moon around Sirius. This information we usually reserve to the elite, but the elite misused that information. It didn't actually practice it. If it would, then all people would practice it. They didn't actually embody that wisdom, and then that wisdom permeated to more and more segments of society. And then even the elite was able to understand. And it is interesting because the elite is now more, it more access to the elite to understand these teachings and see through how the upbringing, things that they could even be dissociated from, the petroleum in the medicines. Um, okay, a free man need not oppress another. Sexuality that is predatory um, is showing of malnourishment. So yeah, I hope this resonates, and I hope you will embody um, the teachings of Venus and have lovely glow that comes from within, love for the self, love to one another, be treated well in and outside the communities, um, and have prosperity and water, clear water. um, yes, and good Venus things, ethically sourced crystals of Venus, ethically mined crystals of Venus. Do you know of rose quartz? I know in the pipe there was a crystal shop. It was all closed because of lockdown. But the pipe in Netherlands, there was a crystal shop that a lady told me she buys only there because they have the certificate, but the certificate is only showing up until the mining. And if this is the one thing, for 3 years I've been talking about this because I don't have access to the ethical mining of the crystals. So Venus-related crystals are rose quartz, um, and as always, yes, I'm charitable with my teachings, but I do appreciate dividends, and a dividend I would appreciate is, I don't know. Yes, yes. Ine, can. Okay. Ine, boy. Fruit shake alert. Thank you. זהו. It is. No. I will tell you this later. Um, so a dividend that I would appreciate is granting from the mining of the minerals and from the acquisition of the land for which the minerals is mined. So idea is building housing first for individuals, and from the rocks of the land. And for this idea, there is actually somebody that was showing me. I don't know what is the name of this person, but they also deserve dividends as long as these dividends don't violate human rights, because they showed me how when I built Half Moon, when people build their housing, they dig into the land, and there are minerals there. So if the construction is done in safe conditions, then we have also minerals, particularly if there are also underground wells, safe bunkers or so. And a dividend for me would be equity in company that mines with zero ritual abuse, zero rape, zero child labor, but conditions that are so safe that we could bring children to work. And I would be interested to have crystals like rose quartz, green crystals. One of the biggest problems, and here we don't have to mine, the rare crystals. We don't have to overmine. They're simple crystals, even malachite crystal, not the Congo minerals malachite crystal. Okay, not blood minerals, because there's malachite also in Congo. But malachite, yes, is accessible crystal. It's not a rare crystal. So profoundly healing for sexual transformation for people that it's when the sexuality is healthy is a friendship and trust, and also between people that are that have sex, that are intimate. When it's not healthy, then it's so profound in raising these issues profoundly to the surface to recover and to heal in a way that is best serving all. One of the things that I did around the Me Too, a man was trying to traffic me, and I went to curate what are the sexual issues that were making me susceptible to be trafficked, and how can I contact healthy sexuality. And this malachite, what I used, assisted me. Um, then they tried to loot the malachite because they saw that it was helping me. And in crystals, we would put the crystal outside, and I say, if somebody took it, then I hope that they will have healing that they needed. Because those who would wear malachite, it would bring all of these issues to the surface, and then it would show me that they were part of Epstein ring. And this I would see what causes this and how it is antithetical to wealth. And also that the people that were Epstein themselves, they were like Alandra, that you can watch Annika Lucas talking with Alandra in episode 9 in her own podcast. Um, and this is basically so. Mm-hmm.
אפשר לעשות גם שוקולד כזה, את יודעת,
כן.
באלה.
Mm-hmm. Also, for something about the programming that they did to Annika Lucas. They did her programming of a siren. Not healthy. People to have love and relationship, enjoy the sensuality in a safe, sane way, is regulated nervous system. And I have to say this. They basically did programming. First of all, they did that to a child, which is in itself wrong, but even to an adult woman. And by the way, part of this they did to me as adult through the astral when I was trying to go to a psychologist. Now, yes, because in sensuality Yes, this is one of the things when I was connected with embodied sensuality. My psychologist asked me, "Do you know how much power it has on me?" And I'm like, "Wait a second, but you are also a sexual man, you're a sensual man. We don't have unequal sexual power." And then I saw that he was also trafficked and groomed um, because he was only confident when he was sexual. And in the beginning of my years, I had this also. Now, actually, it's difficult. Um, Now, actually, it's difficult um, because for me, nobody told me this, but I had a Venus in Taurus, and Venus said in Taurus. And so, Venus in Taurus is in her home sign. And I would immediately have this gnosis that sexuality is a sacred, pure thing. And I didn't know about abundance, and that the glow is from a happy, loving self. But I found it difficult to access this. And my Venus indeed was nightly opposing Pluto and a planet to oppose Saturn. Um, but the more I accessed this, the more, of course, I was loved and even attractive, um, regardless of what I'm wearing or my weight. But my weight will be better the more happy I am, and the more loved I am. I would not have like cravings, and the more my sexuality is honored and respected, I would have regulated nervous system and be a better person. But when people demanded or required or believed entitled to me or to my Venusian qualities, all of this deteriorated. I had to run from them, and it would create reason because why would I be loyal to a person that doesn't honor my sexuality and my non-erotic self? But then even I was in journey of learning to honor these things in myself in better ways, particularly when it comes to self-pleasure, um, and not to create tension on my nervous system. So, and this is because Israel is imbued with Epstein cults, and unfortunately, Netherlands ook, and United States and so on. But the more we change the society, the more basically um, sovereignty in wealth and water and clear water we can have. The more society is about sovereignty and joy of living and appreciation of one's own happiness and life, because rape is antithetical to life. I even so much as reached a point where at the time I applied to euthanasia in Netherlands because of those things. Um, I did not agree to be part of secret society or to do any intelligence related stuff. And I exposed it every time there was attempt to, uh, which brought me to tend to political assassination prevention. Um, yes, so I hope that this teaching of Venus is something that each and every person can embody. So crystals that work, the green crystals,